Welcome back to the Accessible Art History YouTube channel. In today's episode of Powerful Women of the Ancient World, we're exploring one of history's most iconic figures, Queen Nefertiti. Her name means the beautiful one has come, and her image, especially that painted bust in Berlin, has become a global symbol of beauty, power, and mystery. But beyond the perfect features and elegant crown, Nefertiti's story is one of political influence, religious transformation, and artistic revolution. She may have even ruled as a pharaoh in her own right. So to learn more, keep on watching. Nefertiti lived during the 14th century BCE, a time of dramatic change in ancient Egypt. Alongside her husband, Pharaoh Akhenaten, she became the face of a new religious movement centered around a single god, the Aten, or the sun disk. This was a radical break from thousands of years of polytheistic tradition. For millennia, Egyptians worshipped a vast pantheon of gods. For example, there was the mummy god Osiris, lord of the underworld, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of learning and wisdom, and Sekhmet, the lion goddess of war. Pharaohs, especially those of the 18th Dynasty to whom Akhenaten and Nefertiti belonged, worshipped the god Amun. He was the king of the gods and connected with the solar deity Re. As I said a moment ago, Akhenaten did away with the religious traditions and ordered that all worship should be focused on the sun disk, the actual sun, which the Egyptians called Aten, a few years into his reign. The royal couple also moved the capital to a new city, also called Akhenaten, which today is known as Amarna, and ushered in what historians called the Amarna period. Again, this was another major shift. For thousands of years, the capital of Egypt had either been at Thebes or Memphis. They were deeply religious sites as well as a political center of the empire. While the religious shift was likely started by Akhenaten, the art of the period indicates that Nefertiti was also a great supporter of his ideas. We will explore that later in this video. Art from the Amarna period looks strikingly different from the traditional Egyptian canon. For most of Egyptian history, art followed strict rules, meant to communicate order and divine power. Figures were shown in ideal, timeless poses. Faces rarely showed emotion, and things had a very strict proportion. Everything was about stability and perfection, reinforcing the idea that the pharaoh and Egypt itself were eternal and unchanging. But during the Amarna period, something completely new appeared. Artists began experimenting with naturalism and intimacy. Bodies were shown with elongated limbs, narrow faces, and soft curves, sometimes even appearing androgynous. The royal family wasn't distant or formal anymore. They were shown playing with their children, sharing kisses, and worshipping under the life-giving rays of Aten. This dramatic change in artistic style has captivated art historians and archaeologists for centuries. Not only does it reflect a changing attitude towards religion, but towards the human form itself. It marks Nefertiti and her family as truly revolutionary. This wouldn't be a proper video on Nefertiti if I didn't mention her most famous image, the bust. It was discovered in 1912 by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt. Today it's on display at the Neues Museum in Berlin, and it's one of the most visited and often debated objects from the ancient world. Standing at about 20 inches tall, the bust shows Nefertiti with striking symmetry. High cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes, a long graceful neck, and that distinctive tall blue crown known as the Nefertiti cap crown. A broad collar of painted gemstones frames her shoulders, and traces of pigment suggest how vibrant the colors once were. Reds, gold, blues, and greens, all symbols of divine perfection. But one of the most fascinating details is her unfinished left eye. While the right one is inlaid with quartz and painted with black iris lines, the left socket is bare. Some people think that the piece was left incomplete on purpose. Maybe it was a model for training apprentices. Others believe it didn't finish because the royal workshop was abandoned when the city of Amarna fell out of use. The bust's technical precision is extraordinary. It's crafted from limestone, coated in layers of stucco, and then painted with mineral pigments. This combination allowed for incredibly lifelike details, a subtle curve of the lip, a faint crease at the corner of her eyes, even the suggestion of bones beneath the skin. But beyond artistry, the sculpture carried a deep political meaning. Nefertiti isn't shown as an ordinary queen. Her perfectly composed face, upright posture, conveys divine authority. She appears not as a mortal woman, but as a living embodiment of the Aten's powers, projecting earthly and celestial beauty. In many ways, the bust reflects the religious ideals of the Amarna period. The soft modeling of her face and calm serenity capture the new emphasis on inner light and spiritual harmony. Just as Akhenaten was seen as a living embodiment of the Aten, Nefertiti's image communicates the same divine energy and power. One of the most touching examples of Amarna art is the stele of Akhenaten and his family, now in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo. The small limestone relief gives us an intimate glimpse into royal life, something almost unheard of in earlier Egyptian art. The center of the scene, Akhenaten and Nefertiti sit facing each other on raised thrones. Between them are 3 of their 6 young daughters, shown climbing on their parents' lap, reaching up for kisses, or playing with their jewelry. It's tender, human, kind of the domestic affection that was never before portrayed in the rigid formal art of earlier dynasties. In fact, children were rarely shown in ancient Egyptian art prior to this period because childhood mortality was so high. Sadly, it didn't make sense to show them if they weren't going to live long. Above the family shines Aten, the radiant sun disk whose rays end in tiny hands. These hands stretch down to the royal couple, each holding the Ankh, the symbol of life, to their noses. This detail shows us something profound. Life and divine blessing flow directly from Aten to Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and through them to their family and the rest of Egypt. The style reinforces a new vision. The figures are elongated and fluid, with long necks, narrow faces, reflecting the distinct aesthetics of the Amarna period. The focus isn't on timeless perfection, but on the living energy of movement, warmth, and emotion. The shift towards intimacy and naturalism was revolutionary. For the first time, royal art wasn't just about eternal kingship and power. Instead, it showed love, family, humanity. And once again, Nefertiti stands at the heart of it all, portrayed as Akhenaten's equal partner in both divine worship and daily life. She wasn't just his great royal wife, she was ruler. In a single scene, we see how art became a reflection of belief, where one faith and family merged under the golden light of the sun. After Akhenaten's death, history grew quiet, and that silence has fueled centuries of debate. What happened to Nefertiti? Did she disappear into obscurity or rise to even greater power? Many Egyptologists now believe that Nefertiti may have ruled Egypt in her own right, taking on a new royal name, Neferuaten, or even Semenkhare. These shadowy figures appear in inscriptions from the final years of the Amarna period, and some clues suggest they weren't men, but a woman assuming full pharaonic authority. If true, this would make Nefertiti one of the few women in Egyptian history to rule as pharaoh, joining the ranks of powerful leaders like Hatshepsut, who I discussed in an earlier video, and Cleopatra. Artistic evidence supports this idea. In late Amarna reliefs, Nefertiti is shown wearing the blue crown and ceremonial regalia typically reserved for kings. Her image stands alone, commanding divine favor from the Aten without Akhenaten at her side. Her possible solo reign may have been brief, but it demonstrates the extraordinary power she held. Unlike most royal wives, Nefertiti had been depicted performing religious rituals, leading ceremonies, and acting as Aten's intermediary, rules that blurred the line between queen and king. Stepping fully into the throne would have been natural, if not daring, extension of her influence. Unfortunately, much of the story was erased when Egypt returned to its traditional religion under Tutankhamun. The city of Amarna was abandoned, and with it the legacy of the Aten cult and of Nefertiti's rule, and was nearly lost to time. Still, even from the fragments that remain, Nefertiti emerges not just as a consort or co-ruler, but as a sovereign in her own right, whose image and authority challenge the boundaries of power in the ancient world. When Nefertiti's story fades from the historical record, another begins, that of Tutankhamun, the boy king who would become the most famous pharaoh in history. Many scholars believe that Tut was Nefertiti's stepson, based on genetic testing done on 18th dynasty mummies. He inherited a world shaped by her and Akhenaten's radical experiments at Amarna. Under Tutankhamun, Egypt returned to its traditional gods and abandoned the Aten cult. The new regime even tried to erase the memory of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, chiseling their names from monuments and leaving the city of Amarna to crumble in the desert. Yet, despite this attempt at erasure, Nefertiti's image refused to disappear. Her portraits, the elegant busts, the reliefs of her worshipping under the Aten, and her depictions as a nearly divine queen, survived to tell her story in a way the words never could. Through art, Nefertiti transcended time. She became not only a queen of Egypt, but a global symbol of beauty, power, and mystery. More than 3,000 years later, we are still captivated by her. Every curve of her sculpted face, every image carved in stone, reminds us of a woman who challenged the boundaries of gender and divine authority, and whose presence shaped the course of Egyptian history. So as we close this chapter on one of the ancient world's most powerful women, we're reminded that art and immortality isn't a myth. It's a masterpiece.